Hi, everyone. My name is Zainab Khan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Muslim American Leadership Alliance, MALA. And today we have a very special webinar with Congresswoman Grace Meng. It's going to be too fast of a conversation. I wish we had her for longer, but this is just going to be a very exciting time given that May is also Asian American Heritage Month. Today is also the last day of Ramadan. And we're just so delighted and honored to have Congresswoman Grace Meng join us. We'll give it about a couple more minutes before I introduce her. And again, thank you again for participating. We'll be doing a Q&A after, so please use the chat box to pose your questions. And I can't wait to get started. And just to give everybody a background, the Muslim American Leadership Alliance is a non-for-profit. We're a 501c3 national organization, and we focus on arts, culture, and heritage and leadership within the Muslim American community, which is the broadest demographic in the United States. We are non-political, we are non-theological, and we are the first and only organization to archive the oral histories of Muslim Americans in the National Library of Congress. So if you are interested, check out our website. If you'd like to be included as part of the archival collection, we would love to have your story and feature you as well. So now to do the honors, today I am very excited to have a candid conversation, which I had my fangirl moment with Congresswoman Grace Meng. She represents the 6th Congressional District of New York, encompassing the New York boroughs of Queens, including West, Central, and Northeast Queens. Now, Grace is the first and only Asian American member of Congress from New York State, and the first female Congress member from Queens since former vice presidential nominee Geraldine Ferraro. Grace is a member of the powerful House Appropriations Committee and its subcommittees on state and foreign operations, homeland security, and commerce. In addition, she also serves on the House Ethics Committee, and she has passed several legislations of law, including and covering religious freedom, and also to protect communities and provide opportunities for people in communities of color, young people, especially women and children. And, you know, this is just a wonderful way for us to showcase the incredible leadership of Congresswoman Grace Meng in our own community. And prior to serving in Congress, Grace was a member of the New York State Assembly, and before entering public service, she worked as a public interest lawyer. So, Grace, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Zainab, and to everyone at MALA for inviting me here today and for this warm welcome. I wish that we were all together in person, but it's still a pleasure for me to meet with all of you virtually. And before I begin, I want to say that I'm especially honored to be speaking to you as we near the end of Ramadan. During this coronavirus pandemic, I have been really heartened by the ways that the Muslim American community in my borough of Queens, but throughout the city, really, throughout the whole state actually, have come together to make sure that we are helping our shared communities to anything from, I know that you mentioned how much donations you all provided in terms of PPE, to food pantry donations, to making sure that we have halal meals served to our families here in New York City at least. And so it is so important that right now we all continue to work together. There are so many people that are struggling and literally have nowhere to turn. You know, our office, we've, like everyone else, we've been teleworking. Our staff has been working at home. And I will tell you, especially in mid-March and the end of March, our phones are just ringing off the hook. You know, I don't want to be political, but I really felt like there was a lack of leadership and will from the White House, and which really led people to feel like they had nowhere to turn. whether it's the economic implications, whether it's literally people trying to find food or trying to apply for unemployment benefits because they had lost their jobs. And oftentimes what we were also seeing is that our communities, many of our communities, were being impacted at a disproportional rate. You know, we heard from city and state that, you know, we have to safely quarantine at home and homeschool, but there are a lot of families, even in my district and throughout the city, that they can't. They might be essential workers. They might be living in super crowded situations. Maybe living with someone who had the virus.
Mm-hmm.
We have groups that don't even, you know, don't even have thermometers, so they can't even know for sure if they do have a fever or might be exposed to the virus. So real life, you know, day-to-day needs about what people were going through has been really heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want to say, you know, let us take advantage as we start recovering from this pandemic to make sure we are strengthening and building upon our coalitions. And we've really seen a lot of that in our neighborhoods in the past few weeks. And I'm really heartened by that. I do want to save time for Q&A. You know, feel free to ask me anything about Congress, about personal life, whatever.
Well, I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
And for me, it's a very personal connection because similar to you, I'm a daughter of immigrants, I'm a mother, I have a dog, and I am into public service and community service. And can you tell us what has been the role of community in your leadership journey? How did you start?
Gosh, that's a really good question. And every step that I take makes me appreciate more and more how much community played a role. So, you know, growing up, I'm a daughter of immigrants, just like many people probably on this call. My parents worked in a restaurant for most of my childhood. It's not like we had conversations at the table together growing up about, you know, getting into politics. There was none of that, right? Like my dad was away working. We saw him once or twice a week, and you know, parents just worked odd hours. So many similar stories of different immigrant communities. And I was a really shy kid, you know, I was that stereotypical Asian kid who just was super shy and did not like to talk. So I didn't necessarily think about running for office, but I know that as I was going through college and law school that I felt like I was really fascinated with the world of government and public policy. I thought that there weren't many women, there weren't many Asian Americans, you know, at those tables. And I just found it to be really fascinating. So, you know, long story short, I wanted to work in the world of government at whatever level. Had a bunch of internships, and I volunteered a little bit on some random local campaigns here in New York City. And how I really fell into politics, I was really naive. You know, I never took a political science class. Aside from volunteering, I had no experience in politics. I didn't know here in Queens County, our Democratic Party, you know, I never had participated in any of their events. So I was really naive. I ran for the local state assembly, the state legislature. I didn't make it the first time, and I tried again. And, you know, at this time I was running against the county organization, which is probably one of the scariest things I've ever done in my life. Again, knowing nothing, and even to this day, people will ask me, you know, who are your political rabbis? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I didn't grow up reading books about the Kennedys. You know, it's just not something we did. And I'll tell them that it's my grandma, you know, my grandma who was very religious. She, you know, goes to church every weekend, used to, and basically taught me the importance of community and that everyone is able to play the role of being a helper, a teacher, that everyone is a leader, regardless whether you have a fancy title or not. And I think I've really taken that to heart. And advice she gives me is not political at all, but it's how to better the community. And so, you know, it's random community leaders, no one with a real political title, that helped me run for office. And to this day, especially during this virus, they are my experts, right? You could have a PhD in political science, but you can't tell me the needs on the ground of my constituents in New York how they're suffering from the coronavirus, for example. And so the community is my boss, and I'm learning more every day, every week. But I think, you know, that cliche, all politics is local, it's so true. It really is so true.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. This kind of goes into one of my next question. I have so many, and I know the audience does too, but as a working mother, what is your message to other working moms who are coping with the current crisis?
Oh my gosh, it's a really hard month to ask me because we're homeschooling and we're at home. But I will say I am lucky. I'm able to work from home most of the time. Unlike 30% of kids in New York City, my kids have access to the internet and they're able to do their homework online. And so it's been really difficult. I think that to have, regardless of what field you go into, it's important to have that infrastructure. You know, when I was growing up as a kid, I was like, oh, I want to be more American, right? Like, I don't want to live near my parents. I don't want to depend on them. I don't want them to, you know, help me with my own family. And that has all gone out the window. That was what I thought was conventional, you know, like what people should be like in America. But now I'm like, I don't care, like, help me, everyone help me, anyone else want to help? Like, I'm dependent on all of you. I have no shame. And I think that to have that infrastructure, whether it's your own family, whether it's friends, whether it's neighbors, is so important, regardless of what career that you're in.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, it takes a village. That's what they say.
Yeah.
Coming back into that, you've been a champion for arts and cultural heritage, and May is Asian American Heritage Month, and this is definitely an area that you're very passionate about. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives in arts and culture and heritage that you've been undertaking as a Congresswoman?
I mean, most recently, I think that being from a city like New York, it's so important for us to see all these cultural institutions who are really suffering, obviously, loss of revenue, loss of people just, you know, visiting them. We have been trying through the bills that we've been passing in Congress to make sure that they're included and that they're able to receive help from the federal government as well. I think arts and culture really brings us together, and especially in a month like this where Asian Americans across the country and the Muslim community is clearly no stranger to this, facing different types of discrimination, from verbal harassment to physical assaults. This is an opportunity for us to share our different cultures and really to expand and build upon coalitions that we may have already started to build. I also think, you know, cultural institutions in a given community could be a tremendous way to build political power and to make sure that people know that your voices are being heard. You know, it's important that the intersectionality of the different parts of our communities, from the arts to the business, academia, to politics, to make sure that we're working together as much as possible and to utilize that to make our voices heard.
Absolutely. And recently you've been initiating a bill. If you could tell us a little bit about this. It's a hate crimes bill against communities, minorities around COVID-19. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I think that because we've heard so many instances, I mean, we know that about almost 2,000 incidents have been reported since the beginning of March about various hate crimes or incidents related to COVID-19. And that probably goes for many communities, not only the Asian American community. And so we have introduced legislation to make sure that the federal government is collecting more data. We need to have more data in general. We need to know how people have been treated during this virus, if it has impacted Asian Americans at a higher rate. We need to have data in general about how the Black and Latino communities, in Queens at least, are dying at twice the rate of all other ethnicities. And that's the only way that we know where and how to direct resources to the various communities to help, you know, mend the gap.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of young people also that tune in, especially on this webinar. what advice would you offer to emerging leaders today who aspire to work in politics, very similar to you, that don't, that kind of just went in it because of the passion and because of it was like a calling for you almost in a way. And so, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who would be looking into running, maybe 5 years, 10 years down the line?
I think what you mentioned at the beginning about the importance of community is so important. So when I was deciding whether to run or not, remember I had no political science background, no real political experience. I was actually a shy kid. And so I often thought, what business did I have running for office? So before I actually ran, I started a nonprofit with some of my friends. And we literally borrowed someone's office a few times a week. We would advertise it and tell people that they could come in for free if they wanted their mail interpreted or translated, if they needed help reaching out to find access to food, for example. Basic civic opportunities and services that we as children of immigrants wanted to provide for our communities. And it really isn't rocket science, right? Like, so for so many of us, it's probably what we've done for our parents or grandparents as we were growing up. There's so many times where they asked us to help them, and I know personally I would roll my eyes. But I realized that, not everyone has someone around them to help them access these services. And so I think just to make sure that you are knowing the community, you are investing in the community. Sometimes people will ask me questions like, which district should I run in? Like, which one should I pick? And I will tell them respectfully that they're asking the wrong question, because running for office is a commitment to your district. It's a commitment to the people. It's being willing to be involved and invested in their lives, knowing their problems and trying to help them solve it without expecting anything in return. So you can do all that for a community and maybe never run for office or never expect to win when you run for office. And that's the sort of motivation that I think is important, to have the right heart to serve the community. And to me, like, that's the best knowledge, right? It beats having a PhD in political science or whatever fancy degree. It's to really know and to understand that the community, that strength cannot be taken away from you.
And I also loved what you said earlier, is that there's a way, any way that your grandmother has said, to be involved with the community, any way that you can help. You can be a teacher, you can assist in anything. And this is kind of paving the way of what civic engagement really is, especially for the younger generation. And I also know there's been a very, this is wonderful, because growing up, I'm also Asian descent, and being Muslim, having a weird name, I would always look into magazines and on TV to see, who's similar to me. And it's really incredible to see a lot of Muslim Americans now run for politics also, which, even 5-10 years ago, it was impossible. You just wouldn't see it. And especially as a woman, so this is the kind of leadership that's very inspiring for our communities. And I really want to thank you for that, because it, shows a glimpse into your own personal journey into leadership in your life. Now, I do want to ask, you have a dog?
Yes.
Tell us about him.
My dog's name is Bounce. Actually, my brother brought her to us, I think the day after we got married.
Oh.
The dog was in the car, and he came to our doorstep and asked if we ever planned to get a dog. And I said, no, we haven't really thought about it. And he said, well, I've got one for you. So it wasn't planned. We love Bounce, but.
That's wonderful. That's what kind of a dog is he?
She is a Shih Tzu. Yeah.
My dog lover here also. We have a Samoyed. His name is Dimitri.
Oh, so cute.
He definitely makes his appearance. When we did in-person events, he would always be in New York City greeting people.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I love
he can't wait to come back. He's definitely a wonderful mascot. One question that I have for you, Grace, and before we open it up to Q&A from the audience, this was a question that I felt was important, because given all the different sectors of arts, community, culture, heritage, how can we work at the federal and local levels to empower arts and cultural initiatives. And the reason why I'm asking that is because I think post-COVID-19, what the new reality is going to be is still kind of very unknown, right? But the one thing that has kept coming up is identity and belonging. And with Mala, we have a whole range of different nationalities, ethnicities, people who range from ultra Orthodox to secular, Sunni, Shia, you know, whatever it is, it's part of whatever they want to share and participate in is to cherish and celebrate their heritage. So just moving forwards, you know, how can we get engaged with federal and local law levels to continue this kind of work?
So what local elected officials like myself really value, and it's so hard for us, especially in a big congressional district, to get to everyone, to get to know everyone. So literally every week I'm still meeting new people and meeting new groups. Some groups who are more established and are more politically savvy, you know, they will meet with us every single year, either me or my staff, to tell us what they need, to give us an update on their institution. And so I think, you know, what I try to tell groups, especially from some of our newer emerging communities, is that it's important to have contact and communication with your elected officials. So find an excuse, even if it's just with staff or these organizations, to go in, to introduce themselves. You never know when we're trying to build up local events who we might think about partnering with. So it's important for us to know who's out there. And of course, there are always groups that are more active and more out there. And so, you know, we want to make sure that there's a balance. And what's also important, I think, is to let the local elected official know, like, okay, you know, this number of people from our organization, they live and work in your district. This is how they're contributing to the health of your community, and just to paint a full picture of the impact it has on our districts.
Oh, yeah, wonderful. So I'll shift this over to Q&A now. I know we have a couple questions. Okay, somebody has asked, as someone who didn't have a very political science heavy background, what was your adjustment to Congress like? And were there any hurdles you overcame?
Oh, that's a good question. So, okay, when I first ran for office for the New York State Legislature, so I'll start there. Now, remember, I ran against the Queens County organization, so I really didn't start off on a good foot by the time I ran. A lot of people didn't like me. Some people would talk behind my back or actually whisper about me right in front of me. So it was rough, and I'm not saying this to complain. I'm just saying, like, politics is not always a welcoming place for people who don't look like them or people who they're not comfortable with. That being said, each and every one of us comes with the strength of our community. We come with the strength of knowing what our value is and what we're bringing to a table. When I went to the New York State Legislature, I was the only Asian American legislator. So, you know, every other group, the Italians, the African Americans, they all have their own caucus, right? It's like a high school club, the caucuses. So there was a, you know, Black caucus, Latino caucus, and of course I was the only Asian, so there was clearly no Asian caucus. But a struggle, but yet something good that came out of it was, you know, the Black, Latino, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and they included Asian caucus. We became sort of like a tri-caucus, which, especially as someone who was starting out, I found it to be so helpful, right? I could not ask someone next to me what it was like to advocate for Asian issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all I could do was to follow and to learn from, let's say, my brothers and sisters from the Black and Latino communities. And we have so many more issues in common than we think sometimes with other communities, and to learn from them and how they learn to overcome obstacles and to advocate for their communities. So one thing, for example, when I went to the state legislature, one of the things that I always wondered as a kid was, you know, why do we get off in New York City holidays for the Jewish New Year? Why do we all get off for Rosh Hashanah, but we don't get off for my Asian Lunar New Year holiday? And so that was one of the issues. I was like, okay, I know I want to fight for it, but obviously, like, who am I going to ask? There's no one necessarily that cares about Asian Lunar New Year, right? So we actually partnered with other elected officials who were advocating for the same time in the state for school holidays for Eid. And so the coalitions, very informal as they were back then, of our local groups fighting for Asian Lunar New Year holiday to the Eid holidays, kind of casually joined forces, and we were able to work and advocate with and for each other. So that was sort of like one struggle that became an achievement. And obviously, years later, Mayor de Blasio helped make it happen. When I got to Congress, you know, Congress, gosh, like, we talk about women running for office, and it's always such a wonderful talking point and slogans, you know, everyone run. But if you think about it, the reality, you know, we say like 20% of Congress is women, but if you reverse that, that means 80% of my colleagues are male. Yeah. So in any given meeting, there are usually majority male, and occasionally I might be the only female, I might be the only minority. So sitting there, whether you're with Democrats or Republicans from all around the country, you really have to learn, and this is literally something I've been learning year by year, you know, how do I make myself feel confident in this room, confident enough to bring my issues to the forefront, especially if no one else in this room might be even thinking about these issues. And so I remember one time I was advocating for language access for API communities. And literally one of my colleagues turned to me, a Democrat, and said, why, they don't speak English? You know, and so this is like constantly a reality of something. People aren't being malicious about it. It's just, you know, America's a big country and not everywhere is diverse as Queens, New York. And so there are a lot of instances when I'm like, okay, I can't just sit here and coast. I have to be very intentional about what I want to say and why I'm in this room, maybe even more than other members.
Wow, no, that's a powerful example that you shared. Thank you. I have one question here. Who do you look up to?
Oh, is it cheating if I say my grandma again? I don't have politicians. I still struggle. It's like 7 years in.
It's beautiful. I love it.
I mean, I will say it's like, even though she never finished high school or college, didn't run for office or anything, but the political advice she ends up giving me is just amazing. And she probably doesn't think of it obviously as political advice, but you know, like, sometimes one thing she always reminds me is, you know, the importance of listening. And I think that is something, as I've hopefully become better at, has helped me be more effective. Like, when I'm going in a room, especially with politicians, you know, the podium is ours, everyone claps for you, people really make you feel like you're important and special. But the times that are most productive are when I'm actually able to have a mutual dialogue and to have conversations and listen to what people want, what they feel like are priorities. And so many instances when I'm a better listener, I can be more responsive and hopefully more effective.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. This was just such an incredible treat to have you with us, Congresswoman. You know, like I said, it's an auspicious day for us to be talking, because this marks the end of Asian American Heritage Month. It's the last day of Ramadan, and we'll be celebrating Eid this weekend. And thank you again for your kindness, your graciousness, and all the incredible work that you've been doing, not just in your local level, but also nationally, because all of it, you know, local change creates global change. So I really want to thank you. I think, let me see, there might be one more question. Okay, if we have just a few minutes for this, somebody had asked, attacks against minorities and people of color are increasing. Can you tell us a little bit more about the hate crime bill?
Sure. So this bill would actually ask the federal government to collect data on, so one thing that's always been lacking is that local governments, local law enforcement are not sufficiently reporting hate crimes to the FBI. So us as a Congress, we don't have a clear sense about the number of incidents that are actually occurring. When we have lack of data, it's hard for us to advocate for funding. It's just like, you know, during this time of discrimination, you know, we say to someone, you have to report if you were harassed or assaulted. If you don't report it and the government doesn't have record of something happening, even if it's anonymous, it's hard for us to turn to the city or state and say, we need more funding, you know, programs in this area, because they'll look and they're like, well, nothing happened here. You know, there's no, it's like, it's imaginary. And so basically we're asking the federal government to collect data on the number of incidents that have happened during this coronavirus time. But I will say as we begin to close, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I know I only represent Queens, but part of my role, and I don't say this for the purposes just of the Democratic Party, I'm involved with the DNC. So part of my role, my side job, is to literally try to engage different communities, especially Asian communities and women around the country. So, you know, we've been trying to, obviously as a Democrat, I want them to vote Democrat. But what my real purpose is I want them to be engaged in government, to know that there are elected officials who want to listen to them. And sometimes, you know, I can say, you know, like, let me help you, you know, random community in whatever state, connect you to your local elected officials so that you know where to go for help. Like we had to do that once for a situation in like rural Virginia, where there might not be a significant AAPI community. And so it is my part of my role. You know, people should feel free. If you have a random group in Georgia who is having an event, you know, feel free to let me know. I'm always happy to try to support them or to work with people on the ground. I have a few friends in every state because of my role. So we'll make them work hard.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Congresswoman. And what website can we direct people as we conclude this webinar? But we would love to share this. Obviously, we'll be sharing it with our very large national network. Is there a website that we can go to?
Meng.house.gov is my congressional website. Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you again for this candid chat. This was just incredible just to learn about you and the work that you're doing. It's greatly appreciated. And, you know, here living as a New Yorker, I want to commend you for your leadership and all the incredible work you've been doing, especially for communities in Queens that have been hardest hit. Mala has been on the front lines of, you know, helping with PPE, with meals.
Thank you.
It's, you know, this is something that we're all in this together. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, the future may be uncertain, but Americans are very resilient and positive. And this is something that, you know, as Mala, we're very proud is to bring people from all different backgrounds to connect and to be a part of change. So thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Be safe, everyone. Keep in touch.